Shane Hewitt and the Nightshift podcast.
Well, it is a conversation about love normally on here, but sometimes things go wrong. Sometimes people change, and sometimes people aren't who you thought they are. And that means making changes in your relationship. Now, as much as I am an advocate for staying together, finding your way, and all the things that a good partnership looks like, there are situations, we must admit, where it doesn't work. On top of that, there are situations where there are secrets. The dark secrets. And that's what we're talking about today. We're not really talking about relationships that have broken down because, we drifted apart or, we don't really like the same things or all that stuff. We're talking about relationships where someone has really broken the moral compass of what we understand as a society to be a healthy relationship. Alyssa Bach is here to help us understand and navigate through this. Why is Alyssa here? Well, Alyssa does lawyer things. Associate lawyer, Shulman Partners LLP. Family law lawyers. There is a proposal to change the Divorce Act again, and it seems to be all about language. I'm curious where the lines are, where this goes from we don't like each other anymore to this is just not healthy and unsafe. How's it going?
It's going great, Shane. Thanks for having me. It's definitely a very interesting topic, and I'm happy to be on here discussing it with you. I think that the Divorce Act is something that a lot of people don't understand the implications and how it can impact them. And so when we're seeing changes, it's definitely something that people should be aware of. All
divorce structures generally should be reevaluated a little bit more consistently than they are. And, as a guy who's divorced, I can tell you only from the guy's perspective, there's an awful lot of language and things written in there that doesn't represent men. It's old mentality stuff that doesn't represent men. But just to be clear, that's a conversation for another day. I think this is more to do with safety. Tell me the distinction between those two notions of fairness versus safety and all that.
Yeah, and when we're dealing with safety in a family law perspective, it's something that it's very important when we're looking at from a child's perspective and from a partner's perspective, making sure that when you're dealing with a separation, there's a clear plan on how to get out safely, how that's going to impact the kids. And I think that there's sometimes a lack of trust within the justice system to get it right and to make sure that those safety measures can be put in place.
What are some of the proposals that they're staring down the barrel of?
Yeah, so right now there's a proposal to change the Divorce Act to specifically first require lawyers to screen for domestic violence and family violence when they deal with a family. And that's something that right now a lot of lawyers automatically do. It's something that is part of our intake process as our obligation to our clients, but it's not something that's specifically mandated. And especially when we look at the Divorce Act in particular, that's something that is nationwide. And so where you may have provincial requirements or provincial recommendations, it's also not consistent across the board. And so that's one of the things that's being suggested within the proposed changes is putting that requirement onto lawyers. And some of the other things are that when assessing the best interests of a child, that judges need to actively weigh coercive control and family violence as part of the considerations that they're looking at during the best interest test kind of analysis. And something that's important there is that the Divorce Act as it is, when they did make the changes, they did change the requirements that it wasn't just that a judge may consider these things, but they shall. So there is a requirement in there for a judge to consider any kind of family violence when they're looking at the best interests, but this bill is proposing additional measures and I think a more streamlined approach for judges, kind of taking away some of the discretionary aspect that they have. Some of the other things that they're looking to implement is claims around parental alienation, which is often a kind of counterclaim that ends up coming up in domestic violence situations where the parent on the other side is saying, well, no, there's not actually a reason why my child doesn't want to see me, doesn't want to spend time with me beyond the other parent's negative influence.
Yeah. The things mom says or the things dad says, that's the only reason why they don't.
Yeah. And so adding kind of heavier requirements in that area, as far as that only in very specific circumstances could a judge even consider that that's a reason for kind of the children's views. Prohibiting judges from ordering reunification therapy. So that's a kind of really method where getting a therapist involved to try to rebuild a broken relationship, except in, again, like very specific circumstances, looking for a change to the language to make it very clear that there's no assumption about equal or shared parenting time, making sure that the evidence can come directly from the kids, and things about like reunification and relocation. So it's very broad.
There's a lot there, and it's great though. It's great to hear all of the different things. I suppose it's one thing when someone's physically abusive. I mean, the evidentiary part is a little easier there. The coercive control part, that's not as easy because that comes in many forms. And I'm only imagining, but dad upsets mom, and so then mom decides to take the kids to the woods with no cell service today. Let's leave our phones at home today, kids, so we can just go have some time together. When that's nice and probably a great move, except it's really driven at the fact that dad upset mom, and mom is now actually keeping the kids away from connecting and talking to dad. That's subtle. That's pretty sneaky. Like, that's the stuff that I think when you look at couples, and just anecdotes and stories, but when you hear couples talking about it, that's the allegation they make. Well, okay, that's great, but, she's mad at me, therefore, she's gone and done something where I can't even reach the kids now for 2 days. How would you navigate that? That's incredibly difficult.
Yeah, and it's when we're looking at coercive control in particular, it's so many small things that when looked at individually, it doesn't paint the picture. It has to be looked at holistically. It has to be looked at with this pattern of behavior. It's normally when you're dealing with, like you said, subtle kind of actions that can be viewed in different ways. There's normally a rationale to it or some kind of justification. It's also passively following where somebody is, looking at financial statements, putting pressure onto somebody about what they're doing on their day-to-day. Those are all things that, when looked at as just the particular one circumstance, you're not going to see it. And so you have to look at it and say, okay, instead of trying to justify every single specific circumstance, we as kind of a legal community have to really assess it as a holistic view. It has to, you have to take a step back and say, okay, all of these things together, is that coercive control? And make that something that's very clear to, if somebody's in court, to a judge, right? Because it has to be presented in a way that makes sense and that a judge can see it. Because again, like if you're just pointing out small pieces, it's not going to give the full picture on what's happening and why that's having a negative impact on the family dynamic and the kids. Mm-hmm.
Well, it's all important. It's tough stuff. It sounds like good service, frankly, from it forces the lawyers and the judges to have the conversations and not hurry, which I suppose is good and bad, the hurry part, but timely, I suppose, is written in there too. And it's amazing to see. The change is good, and we wanted to bring it forward because these things are going on. Now, if any of those things land with you as concerning, of course, you should speak to a counselor. You should speak to your doctor. You should speak to your lawyer if you have one, and get that, because your counselor is also going to be able to identify these patterns pretty quickly as well and might be able to work in your favor. Alyssa Bach, thank you. Changes proposed to the Divorce Act. What does that mean? And so much more. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Shane Hewitt.
Shane Hewitt and the Night Shift on the iHeart Radio Talk Network.